All right, the Well Life episode coming at you, Tyler and I. All right, another little episode taking you through
20.
episode 20. It is the 20th one.
Once again, we're back.
Yeah, so, all right, coming at you with another point. It's the 7th point of how to better live your life in a healthier, more well way.
An actionable way.
Yep.
Kind of coming back to one of our earlier episodes, just also how do you get some more movement in your day. We're even recording this doing a little walk, 20 minutes outside of the gym.
Yep. Normally we're in town with big trucks driving by us and try to come to a quiet neighborhood. Currently passing landscapers, so that's good. But, all right, this one, we're gonna be talking about limiting your sugar and alcohol intake. So those can be, right, kind of want to start this off just saying how those can be such a huge part and play a huge role in almost like empty calories that people don't even realize that they're tracking.
Yeah.
Right, so
I think
this,
also like, my bad, finish here.
Yeah.
But at the front of it, it's not saying you can't have these things, don't do these things, but it's just easy to overconsume them.
Yeah.
Right, so how do you limit them, how and why?
Yep, so we're gonna take in our first point of
there.
Why, you wanna go there?
I'll go there.
All right, let's go there. So we kind of alluded to it, but let's go there right into it. First point of why is gonna be caloric intake, Tyler.
Yeah, so again, kind of transition in there. It is not that saying we should absolutely have no sugar, no alcohol, but there are some negative factors when you're thinking about sugars just by themselves and alcohol in itself. And one of those could just be the overall caloric intake. So as I feel like you were kind of alluding to there, was that sometimes when we're having these things, definitely, I'll say it from an alcohol standpoint, most people aren't thinking about the amount of calories that are actually in alcohol, right? So having a couple drinks, no, maybe it's not good for me, but I'm actually thinking about the actual caloric content.
Yeah.
And then same from a sugar standpoint. So it's very easy to overeat things that are simple sugars. So think about how many little Oreos you can put down. A serving of Oreos, I don't know off the top of my head, you might, but it could be like 2, right? But you can easily eat 6. So you're saying 3 times the actual serving size. Or think about a soda, right? Or even if we thought about it in what could be a healthier version, but even just like we were saying, like fruits. So a fruit juice, right? Thinking about like a glass of orange juice could be 200 calories. Yeah. And you probably could drink a couple of them.
And someone pure sugar too, right? So you're talking about like that. That's just straight sugar, right? It's like a can of Coke. People steer away from Coke because it's got a terrible name around, like it's a crap drink with no nutrient value. Obviously, orange juice might have a little bit more vitamin value and stuff, but with no fiber, with no other thing to bind it in your digestive tract, right? It's just pure sugar at the end of the day. That's where that's another topic for another day to talk about these juices and stuff. But
apples are great, right? Go to apple juice. It's purely just the sugar portion of it, right? You don't get the added micronutrients that would be in an apple there.
Yeah. One more point I wanted to make, actually, going back to alcohol, is alcohol metabolizes as sugar, right? So you're kind of talking about, it's a double whammy with that. You put down a couple of Trulies, a couple of beers. Obviously, beer is straight carbs. In that sense, that's direct sugar. But even the healthiest shot of something, if you have a quick little, vodka on the rocks with some club soda, it's even one shot's 100 calories of something that's going to metabolize into just about 100 calories of sugar, so it kind of breaks down that way, and it's just stuff to be aware of as you go out and you're doing your thing, and then kind of at the end of the week you're like, oh, I had 5 drinks this week. Well, that might be minimum 500 calories that you could have been over, and that's why you're not dropping weight.
That's if it's the cleanest version of a drink you could have, right?
So with that, right, that's kind of the broad spectrum of what we're talking about. Going into point number 2, talking about more so gut health, inflammation, and
again,
toxicity.
why limiting?
Why you should limit this. To start, simple sugars, obviously, right? The more simple they are, pure sugar at its baseline is going to absorb extremely fast, and it actually, if there's nothing else for it to sit with and digest with and bind with, like fiber or a healthy fat or something that's a little bit better and is going to give you some more micronutrient density and fiber in your digestive tract in your gut, you can actually have a greater proliferation of bad bacteria, right? You just good bacteria versus bad bacteria. There's specific terms for each of those and what those go to, but you know, there's such a major hindrance on your immune system, your cellular ability, right, to function at a high level and be supported by this good bacteria when you intake sugar, especially on an empty stomach. We're going to get into that. And then the same thing, right, with alcohol. So your inflammation response goes up. Your gut health goes down, your toxicity, right? Alcohol is literally a toxin you're putting into your body, and your kidneys, your liver have to process it to filter it out of your system. That's why, like we've said, you feel drunk, right? When you have it, because it impairs you. It kind of starts to delay your systems. It impairs your nervous system and your heart rate once it gets into the bloodstream, and it has this toxic effect, right? So obviously limiting alcohol and sugar intake in this way, simple enough, right? Could be if you're overeating candy every night, it's sitting in your body when you're sleeping, or first thing in the morning, you're getting up and having a croissant or something, right? There might be some issues that are related to your health just by simply doing this day after day, week after week, right? So just something to be aware of, where people might look to go to the doctor and take a medication, or they feel sick, or they have an autoimmune issue, but it's like, this might be just 10 years of crap eating and damage done by that, where it could have just been avoided if you utilized those sugars correctly, or you made better choices in timing of when to eat them, or you didn't eat them. You know? And
to that point, you're kind of, you put it in the sense of it being a bunch of candy at the end of the night, but it could be, all I eat is a bowl of cereal, bagel, and some other pasta, right, for dinner.
So I know like that takes you to point 3 right away.
It does. It jumps right there as we seamlessly transition. But also kind of thinking about, from your point, you're talking about the body processing things in an order. So when we're drinking too, when you're thinking about when you're going to get drinks and you're out on that Friday, Saturday night, whatever it is, your body, if you're also having a meal, is going to prioritize getting rid of that alcohol in your body because it's a toxin before it even digests that food. So now think about how that kind of messes with your gut lining, how it messes with your digestion, because it's going to let that food sit as it kind of works to get rid of the alcohol before it clears it, or it goes to digesting the food that you're putting into your body. So as we transition to that third point of why it's important to limit sugar and alcohol here, one important thing to think about is blood sugar spikes and that spike in insulin response as we intake sugar. So the issue that we run into here with blood sugar spikes is it could definitely just send signals to tell your body to hold on to or to store fat. So as I explained in that example before, if I have a bagel for breakfast followed by maybe a muffin and some sort of pasta for lunch, that's going to drive up blood sugar, right? So that's going to drive up sugar in my blood, and then it's going to drive up this insulin response. And what happens is your body's going to send this signal to, insulin's going to come out. It's going to say, we need to get glucose into the cells because I have this blood sugar response. And if these cells are already full of glucose, your body only has one choice, and that's going to be to store this glucose, right? To store it as fat. So because you're not going to have, your cells are already filled with glucose because you've already had spikes, you've already had enough glucose in your system, and if that's the case, you're not doing enough to burn it off in that time frame, that your body's simply just going to store it as fat. So we want to be very cautious of these multiple or continuous blood sugar spikes throughout the day.
Yeah, and I think another point off of that too is you don't realize that your body starts to kind of ramp up on cravings when you get into a high blood glucose insulin. Like insulin gets shot into the system, your blood glucose can drop if you don't, right? Eating fibrous foods, higher in protein along with your carbohydrates and a little bit of slower burning carbohydrates. You hear that word slower burning, that just means your digestion is a little bit prolonged and it's not as simply digested as sugar. But you get into this kind of up and down, right? A peak and a trough of like this loop that you get thrown into where it's like if you eat a bag of candy right? You have some, you wait a half hour, you're hungry again, right?
Yeah, your body's going to look for that sugar response
you're
again.
going to need the sugar because the energy's in, energy's out. It's getting stored into the cells because it's quick absorbing, and it's a very easily available energy source for your body. But it might not be a sustainable source, right? If you eat a handful of nuts or some beef jerky, right? You're probably not going to want that beef jerky or more nuts, even though you might overeat some of it. You're probably not going to want that again and again and again in the day, right? I know if I have, funny thing with me, like if you go and have dessert or you go out, right, drive somewhere to a really good donut place or something, I almost hate going to get like a box of donuts and try different donuts if I'm having a cheat day, because I feel like having one or two donuts just is not enough, and I'm not even close to satisfied. It's like a funny thing. It's like, when's the last time you've eaten ice cream or cake? Obviously, if you're extremely full after a full meal, different, but if you're eating a snack or a cookie, when's the last time you wanted to go back for another cookie and another cookie and another, right? It's just obviously your taste buds are extremely sensitive to it, but your body starts to crave it because there's so many ups and downs where your body's looking to boost that blood glucose again for energy, right?
Yeah, it just becomes a cycle.
Yep. So taking on to point number 4 has to do with protein synthesis and impaired recovery. So there's been a couple studies done on this. I read one recently. It had to do with alcohol consumption, kind of like binge drinking after a couple of workouts, right? After a workout, you're going in, your body's trying to shuttle protein into the muscle belly to repair the muscle, right? And sometimes we say with sugar, it can be positive as a post-workout to shoot, right, glucose into the blood, and then insulin pulls that and kind of helps shuttle protein into the muscle belly as well, right, for recovery. Right, sugar intake can be negative if you're just increasing your caloric intake so much to the point where it's just too much sugar, but this is more for the alcohol side of it, right? So with alcohol, we're talking about impaired synthesis of protein, impaired, that's like at the muscular level. So they did studies on muscle fiber repair, and with an excess amount of alcohol, you actually have impaired synthesis. And obviously, right, here comes the truck. And at the kidney level, your kidneys have to sort through protein as well. Alcohol has to be sorted through your kidneys too, right? Your liver starts to clear it. So there's all these processes in your body that's just totally impaired and slowed down, almost like there's road blockages in an extreme level, right? If you're binge drinking or having multiple drinks, and obviously that's just impairing total tissue repair, total muscle repair, and just not optimal for any of your body's muscle mass or recovery levels, right? If you're trying to make gains in the gym or going out and doing your thing, obviously having one drink, not terrible, but just be aware of kind of binge drinking or drinking in excess, where you go 3 to 4 to 5 drinks can roll over that pretty easily. And you're talking about a ton of calories on top of just soaking your system in a toxin.
Yeah,
right.
Knowing, right, if you've got goals and you worked out, you got a good workout on Friday after you left work, if you go on a happy hour after that, knowing that alcohol is going to affect what you did in the gym, right, that day and the week prior.
Yep, 100%.
So, right, to recap a little bit about why we want to limit sugar and alcohol, right? Caloric intake, gut health, inflammation, toxicity, blood glucose spikes, and then just an issue with overall protein synthesis. Want to be aware of that. So, all right, how then do I limit my sugar intake and alcohol consumption? I'll let you take point 1 here.
Sure. Oh, you said let you take. Oh, sorry, I thought you said you were going to take. I got it. All right, here we go. So limiting sugar and alcohol, right? For point 1, to how to limit it is going to be just limiting it and being very aware of limiting it on an empty stomach, right? Stuff absorbs extremely fast, like I mentioned in the beginning. When you have an empty stomach, there's nothing else binding it, slowing the digestion down, or pairing with it, right, to kind of spread it out. And number 1, sugar's getting into your system. You get a bigger glucose spike and then a bigger glucose sink in your blood, or your blood sugar goes up and then shoots down. And obviously, right, there's kind of asterisks here if you're going to work out immediately in the morning. Cool, that's great, right?
Yeah.
You're going to use
what are
that
you doing with that energy?
What are you doing with that energy that you're putting in, right? But Other than that, it's just not positive. You're starting yourself out and priming your day and setting yourself up for a huge sugar spike in the blood, an insulin roller coaster, and then on top of that, you're feeding, right? After fasting while you're sleeping, you're feeding, your initial morning feeding is taken in with pure sugar into your gut bacteria biome, right?
Yeah.
So going back to the bacteria thing, just not a good thing like we talked about prior.
Think about how much more sensitive your body has to be to it if you're not already prepped with a base before food or alcohol.
Exactly. Repetitively doing that, your body can sway into that negative bacterial growth. That's where you get certain diseases and gut health issues, right? There's a multitude of those that give people so many problems with nutrient absorption and autoimmune diseases and stuff. And then on the alcohol end, right, you're going to absorb alcohol much faster, right? You're probably going to get drunker a lot faster, which is a tactic for a lot of people.
Which is never the goal, right?
To cut down the cost and the reliance on it.
But it makes it a cheaper opportunity, though. So what's your recommendation?
Recommendation, I would say, right, is prime yourself with something that's a protein, somewhat of a fibrous food, right? If it's alcohol, just make sure you have some type of protein, fat, and carb in your gut before you're drinking, and pair it with that so it's not straight in the system. And it's going to also give you a better opportunity to absorb the nutrients from the food if you pair it, rather than if you douse yourself with straight alcohol or straight sugar and setting yourself up for kind of like a crappy opportunity for anything you eat after that is going to be hindered.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
So looking at kind of our next point here on how to limit sugar and alcohol is kind of a seamless transition to what you're saying there. And it's how can we, in fact, limit the effect that sugar and alcohol has on us? And that's by just combining it with either more complex, or one, substituting simple sugar solutions or simple sugars for complex sugars. So if I'm thinking having something that's not just a granola bar, right, but maybe having something that's more of a rolled oat for breakfast, right, that's got a little more nutrients and it has a little more fiber attached to it, or pairing with foods that are more nutrient dense. So I'm going to eat something that's more of a quicker carb. I'm going to want to pair that with either some fats or some proteins just to slow down the overall nutrition, or to slow down the overall absorption rate of that food in my body. I know for me, even thinking about lunch, I mean, very, very frequently I have, say, a white rice or something for lunch, which is going to be something that probably has a pretty high glycemic index, meaning that it's absorbed pretty quickly by the body, but I'm always having that with either some very good protein, right, chicken, steak, fish, and usually rounding that meal out with some sort of fat. So it'll be with avocado. Typically.
So it's okay to eat white rice if you're pairing it with stuff that's a little bit slower, or some good protein, good fats, right? Sometimes you can get, even, this is just a whole different little side point I want to add, you can get a little digestive issue if you add something that's almost too complex, like a brown rice or a quinoa. Running across the street. Right? If you are eating a multitude of stuff, but not a bad thing and not as bad as being on the simple sugar end. And one more point I wanted to add too is most people experience it when they get a hangover, or not even drinking as much as they thought they drank. The next morning they wake up from 3 margaritas and they have an even worse headache, and they feel crappier because it's such a high sugar, high alcoholic drink, right? So now you're combining these two things, and that's just even worse. And that's kind of proof in the pudding, where you know that you feel worse if you do this, right? As opposed to if you have something a little bit cleaner and have less of it.
That's right. Your body's processing that ethanol, right? It's literally a sugar alcohol. That's the problem right there, and that's usually what leads to the hangovers the next morning.
So this even goes right into our next point. So next bullet on how is make sure that you hydrate properly. So staying away from that sugar and alcohol intake, but if you do have it, right, especially on the alcohol end, make sure that you're hydrated. You'll probably, number one, have less cravings. And with hydration, right, we're talking about, water. You can listen to one of the previous podcasts on hydration, but we're talking about water with adequate electrolyte intake. So great levels of sodium, probably up to 1,000 milligrams if you're active and you're sweating on a one intake basis, right? And then talking about adequate sodium with potassium, some magnesium, right? So your body needs those electrolytes to retain water in the muscle and in the tissues. And that's going to allow your body just to be a little bit better at processing everything and more efficient, right? So you take that hydration and you pair it with going about your day, you're going to have less cravings. Typically, if you're dehydrated, your body will have greater levels of cravings of simple sugars and energy forms because it's not sustained enough at the cellular level with enough water retention, and you'll get more cravings, right? On an alcohol level, you're going to actually give your cells a better chance to process the alcohol, especially in the muscle belly too, because it's going to have a greater, right, water kind of retention, water to particle ratio when you intake the alcohol. So your body can actually wash it out a little bit more efficiently and just process everything more efficiently, right? So hydration is a huge, huge thing. And then it's going to also help with any type of hangover or feeling laid over, right? Your body's just going to be in better shape the next day, and you'll be able to go about your day much more efficiently.
No, it's great. As we kind of round it out, I think our fourth point is one that, like hydration, we bring in a lot for our overall well-being improvements, and that's just exercise. As you strength train and exercise, it will help you limit the effects, at least, of alcohol and sugar. So if we think about being able to increase strength, increase muscle mass that we have in our body, that will actually, as we talked about earlier, when this sugar is getting pulled into our cells, that would actually allow us to pull in more glucose into our muscle bellies and then be utilized for exercise as opposed to it, right, being stored for fat.
Yep, 100%. So that's it, right? We got our 4 whys, why you should limit sugar and alcohol, right? Caloric intake, gut health, your blood glucose and insulin levels, right? Sending you on a whole frenzy for the day. And then you have a protein synthesis and impaired recovery statement based off of mainly your alcohol intake, right? So past that, right?
How?
We got our hows.
Yeah, how are we doing
limit it? Let's limit it on, go for it.
Yeah, we're limiting it right by, and really limiting the effects of it as well by not allowing ourselves to intake these on empty stomachs, right? We want to have a baseline there, or a baselining right in the stomach, some other digestion kind of happening there. Also pairing these simple sugars and alcohol with at least nutrient dense foods, and then also pairing that kind of from an overall nutrition standpoint with some adequate hydration, and then rounding it out with a good exercise routine. Both strength training and cardio definitely help you utilize these sugars and metabolize them a little bit better.
Yeah, so right, hope you guys gave a listen to the full podcast. Love you guys listening. We appreciate it, right? We're just trying to bring you some value points, value adds to your own life, from our lives, and kind of how we like to live, our perspectives, and some useful facts that you can apply to your life to probably improve, right, your state of being every single day. This one is a very, very, home-hitting principle kind of podcast with sugar and alcohol.
Choices you have to make every day definitely include sugar and alcohol. So what actionable items can you take, right, to kind of just ease the effects on them daily?
Yeah, if you guys have anything you do, would love to hear it in the comments. Shoot us a message at the Well Life Podcast on Instagram or YouTube. Hope you guys enjoyed listening.
Appreciate it. Like, follow, share. Let us know what you think.
Cool. Thank
you
guys.
guys.